I just took a ride in a silver machine, and I'm still feeling mean. Do you want to ride? See yourself going by the other side of the sky. I got a silver machine.
A lot of people know Lemmy for Motorhead, and why not? But any Motorhead enthusiast would be well served to go back a decade and check out all the Hawkwind records Lemmy's on. Whew.
Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Hawkwind was there, right with them, you know, same level.
Yeah, a bit dangerous and experimental, you know. And I tried to, well, I wanted to see stuff like that in punk, you know. I didn't want to hear, you know, 2-minute songs over and over again. I wanted to see everyone stretch themselves like Hawkwind did, you know.
I've always been a fan of Hawkwind from very early on. I mean, it's quite odd as New Order. The driving sound that Hawkwind had, the very pulsy, percussive keyboard sounds, you know, we would actually listen to that and try and emulate it, you know, in songs like Temptation and Everything's Gone Green. We actually did try and rip off Hawkwind.
That band got lost in the shuffle. They never really had hit records in the States. There was never a heavy image. They were much more British. They were bigger in Britain than they were in the United States. In other words, they weren't like the Yardbirds, or they weren't like the Who or the Animals that had an image, a visual image that America latched onto. You never saw them on Shindig. You never saw them on Hullabaloo. You never saw them on all those TV shows, is where we used to get our information. Hawkwind kind of went under the radar somewhere. They were like Golden Earring, UFO. There were certain bands you knew about, but you never knew what they looked like.
We're a space rock band, so, I mean, a lot of the music we play was around science fiction stories, which we'd sort of interpret and put into music, so we're a pretty heavy rock band with nice flowing electronics. It was a very powerful rhythmic band. I mean, we were all into real sort of heavy rhythms with sort of electronic music swirling in and out.
We were like a punk band, really. We were playing music, and we didn't say, well, we're very clever and this is all really technical. We said, well, we can do it, you can do it.
We used to do lots of benefit gigs for Friends and International Times, which were the magazine that came out in the 70s, used to have The Price of Dope, with the alternative things what were going on around the city, you know. Like in Ashbury, you know, the similar sort of free newspapers, sort of things like that. So we were involved in all that scene, you know. So if you imagine similar like Jefferson Aeroplane, wouldn't it, and Grateful Dead, it was very similar parallels in a way, you know.
They would go and play those free festivals like in some weird forest in Wales or something, and, you know, and that just loads of people off their head on mushrooms and all this kind of thing.
People thought we were some sort of hippie fucking flower people. It fucking wasn't true, man. We were like a black nightmare, man. We used to lock the doors so people couldn't get out.
We used to get this sort of trancey beat going, this trancey rhythm, and a strobe going, you know, and it's like, it didn't drive you insane, it just put you into a trance, really. It hypnotised you, you know, and we quite often had it at 7.5 cycles per second, which is the brainwave speed, and which is the speed at which people can have epileptic fits. We didn't really have a problem with epilepsy. Nobody complained, and nobody said, oh, yeah, we're causing people to have epileptic fits, you know.
We used to have 5 strobes at audience eye level, pointing at them, not the band. We used to play in the darkness, you know. And 18 projectors on a gantry on a big screen above us, right? Fucking amazing light show and naked dancers, you know.
And they represented the first sort of counterculture,
Alternative.
you know, with IT and Oz magazine, and
that was all
very
coming up. And it was a wonderful time to grow up to be a kid.
Yeah.
But mostly I remember standing at the front drooling at Stacia.
The girl with the breasts out.
With a girl with her breasts out, which was incredible for a 12 or 13-year-old. You know what I mean? It was like our education.
When I was 14 or 13, it was the only time I got to see a pair of tits, was when I went to see Stacia on stage, you know. It was the highlight of the fucking evening. Everyone was moshing down trying to get to the front to look at Stacia's tits, and they were magnificent. Fucking magnificent, man. Unbelievable, you know. That, I mean, for a 14-year-old boy, that was fucking incredible. Fantastic.
God bless Hawkwind and Stacia. Fantastic.
At the time, like in the rock business, a woman who sort of doesn't wear clothes and paints their body and just dance, you know, was sort of taken as being something, you know, oh, whatever, you know, nothing important.
She wasn't a stupid woman. She was an artist.
We were a bunch of misfits, basically, all of us.
We were sort of quite a strange load of characters, you know, and I mean, it was the band were involved in drug subculture as well because of taking LSD. You know, we were involved in the early sort of days of flower power, I suppose. You know?
It was sort of maybe the end of the hippie era, and we had our ideals.
We did things for the people, and we were in touch with the people. I mean, The Clash did stuff like that later. Other bands did as well that were living in the Notting Hill scene, but I don't know of any bands that did it before us. And we had a huge following, you know, because we do any gig, and we do a gig in London, it would be like a drug dealers convention, you know, we get all these dealers there, all the top dealers, all the big guys giving away drugs, you know, they give me bottles of liquid acid, I'd take them to gigs and give them away to the people, you know, and people come up to me later, like recently, you know, and say, wow, that gig you did in Barry Memorial Hall in 1971, it changed my life. I said, well, was it the band or the drugs?
It was a band of freaks where half of them used to drop acid and the other half used to take speed and downers, you know, so there was quite clashes and strange games on, you know. Dick Mick and Lemmy were sort of always into a lot of speed and grumpy. Dick was always grumpy because they'd been up for a few days, and we'd get picked up in our van and he'd be all grumpy and Lemmy would be all surly and get him slammed at all and sit down, you know. And no one would speak to him because they knew, they go, oh, fuck off, you know, sort of thing. So nobody would speak to him for about a few hours till they, you know, they sort of got a bit better.
We did an Andy Warhol superstar launching in London, and, you know, the audience all turned into skeletons. I thought, Jesus, you know, I think I better stop taking these drugs. Sideways through time, yeah, it's an electric line. Straight to your zodiac sign. Well, I got a silver machine. I got a silver machine. I got a silver machine. I got a silver machine.
Silver Machine was a hit on the radio, and if you think that's quite a radical record, you know, it's like really distorted, and then there's this synth going off. So it was a pretty weird record to be like a pop hit in England.
They all tried to sing it, every one of them, and they finally tried me, because I was a new boy, you know. And I got it in like 2 takes or 3 takes or something. And that really pissed them all off, you know. And then it went to #1, you know, with me singing it, which really pissed them off. And the final nail, I think, in my coffin, which they never forgave me for, was the NME, the Musical Express, put a picture of me on my own on the front cover, Hawkwind above it. I don't think Nicky ever forgave me for that as long as he lives.
I was never jealous. I don't know, maybe other people were. I mean, I'm terribly naive. I don't see sort of loaded innuendo in everybody's actions or you know, thoughts or dialogue. I found Lemmy in certain ways quite hard to work with because we were in a band where everybody was taking different drugs. So you had this sort of disparity between people of where they were and, you know, what sort of wavelength they were on. You know, I was into sort of psychedelics myself and pot and mushrooms and peyote and all that sort of thing, pretty calm stuff, you know. And I think Lemmy was more into amphetamines, and other people were as well. Other people were into downers, you know. And sometimes it was quite hard working with Lemmy because he might stay up for 5 days on speed and then crash for a week or something like that. And it was quite hard, you know, sort of getting a handle on the wavelength he was on, really.
And Stacia tell a few stories, because the thing with Lemmy, he was prone to take a lot of speed, you know, which consequently, he used to hang the band up because he was never on time to leave in the morning when we had to get up and catch a flight somewhere, and we'll all be downstairs waiting to go, and Christ, you know, where is he? You know, I'll have to go upstairs, and he'd be still in bed, you know, and you'd shake, come on, Lemmy, for Christ's sake. Well, oh, right, OK, get your trousers on, you know, and you go out the room thinking he's actually got his trousers on, he's getting dressed, and you just turn over and go back to bed again because, you know, he's knackered. And it did cause a lot of stress within the band. All of us, you know, all of us got pissed off over it. It wasn't, you know, just one or two. We did get pissed off over it. Managed to give him a talking to. Lemmy, look, come on, pull your socks up. You've got to get, you're letting it decide down here. You know, you've got to get yourself together and all that. So there was all of that going on, which used to piss off the band. So, you know, consequently, like I say, we'd come over to England, gone back to the States, and then he got busted at the border sort of thing, which seemed to, seemingly, when you're on tour with all the stress factors, like the last straw, you know what I mean?
We were in the States touring, and we were in Niles, Michigan, on the way to Detroit. I don't know if you know where Niles is. It's on the other side of Michigan from where Detroit is. So we pulled over at a roadhouse to eat, and I wasn't hungry, you know, being a speed freak. So I just got this new camera, so I went out prowling around looking for things to, you know, yeah, with the new camera. And I got conked over the head in this abandoned housing project and fucking came round without my camera, without any money. I go back to the roadhouse and they're gone. And dumped me there, you know. I mean, what kind of shit is that, you know? One of your band members just missing after you have a meal and you just drive off. That's not the way I work, you know. And so now I'm stuck here, so I have to hitchhike across Michigan, which is the whole state. And it's getting dark, and I got lifts from microbuses full of fucking hippies, you know, who are passing joints around, so even worse. I mean, I'm tripping, you know, like, and homosexual truck drivers. That was a fun time. Just all kinds of misfits, you know. And I get to the hotel in Detroit. Luckily, I remember the hotel. And there's a convention of disabled people there. So I walk in the door, coming down off acid, and there's all these, you know, doing wheelies in the lobby and that, you know. And I go up to my room, crash out for about 2 hours, down the sound check, do the show. Crossing into Canada the next day, I get busted for speed. And in jail for 2 days in Canada, handcuffed to a fucking iron bar. And then I get the news as I'm going into Essex County Jail with my overalls over my arm, going into the delousing section. This voice behind me says, "You're bail, Kilmister." So oh, thank you, you know. Flown to Toronto immediately, do the show, 4 o'clock in the morning, fired. Apparently they only got me out of jail because my replacement couldn't make it in time. They'd probably left me in there. Is that a saga? That's like a Viking fucking quest, isn't it? And then I have to get home from America, from Canada, with 2 guitars and a suitcase all by myself, you know.
We had a meeting and we talked about it, and people were saying, well, you know, Lemmy's really hard to work with. People were sort of airing all their grievances about him, about how he was so erratic in terms of, you know, his behaviour. He's a nice guy. Nobody didn't get on with him. You know, nobody fell out with him or anything, you know. It was just really hard working with somebody that was up and down like that, and we weren't on the same wavelength all the time. So it was then decided that we would relieve him of his duties. Well, people said, oh, well, we should sack him then. And I'd say, well, you know, go on then. And they said, oh, I don't want to do it. And I said, well, you do it then. And they said, no, I don't want to do it. And I said, well, you do it. And they said, no, I don't want to do it. And then I said, well, you do it. To everybody in the band. And I said, well, you know, if it's a decision we've made, somebody's got to tell him. I'll tell him. So I went and said to Lemmy, look, you know, everybody's just made this decision. Everybody finds it really hard to work with you. And we've decided that we should relieve you of your position, to put it plainly.
Outside the hotel, there's these lights, green. I always remember this. It was these green and red flashing lights. So in Lemmy's room, there was these green and red flashing lights going on. We had to go in there and say, look, I've got something to tell you, you know. Yeah, it was quite a sad thing, actually. Very sad. I mean, he was very upset over it. And, well, we all were, really. You know, you think at the end of the day, it's... I mean, I probably thought when we get back to England, it'll all go back to normal again, you know, and then we continue as we always had done, you know. But it didn't, and that was it, really. I came back to Devon because I lived in the country. All the rest of them lived in London, and they all had their meetings up there, and that was the end of it all, really.
Well, Lemmy was actually very shocked because I suppose he just thought his lifestyle was quite normal and everybody was getting on with him and nobody had any real grievance about him. Nobody really did. It was just like accumulation of things that we thought at that time. I'm saying we thought at that time.
Was it 3-2 or 4-2? I can't remember now. Such a long time ago.
By this time, we sort of had enough, really, because we thought, well, we can't cope with this sort of thing. You know, we're just a band and we just haven't got a lot of money and we just want to do gigs. And there was a sort of feeling at the time that, well, this is a bit too much, you know, and so we decided to get another guy to come over from London to come and play bass.
When I arrived at the gig, and I said, you know, where the fuck's Lemmy? And they said, this other guy, Paul Rudolph, was taking his place, that they'd sacked Lemmy, and I mean, I was devastated, but I'm the type of person who, I keep a lot inside, so I think I just carried on, but I was devastated.
Did you feel it coming? Or were you completely blindsided?
No, it was coming for a long time. Because what it was 70s drug snobbery, you know, like they were all just doing organic drugs, man, you know, and I was doing speed and organic drugs, so I didn't like that, you know. And Dave Mick was a speed freak too. That's why he got me into the band, because he wanted somebody to take speed with him and stay up with. So that was what it was, basically, you know. And also I fucked up quite a bit. I mean, I missed a couple of planes on the tour before that, and they sort of got on my ass about that, but I never did it again, so. I mean, they just weren't very hip. You know, they're supposed to be the most cosmic band in the universe and everything, you know, out of sight vibes and all that, you know. And it turns out they were just as fucking mercenary and venal as everybody else was, you know.
Not very zen.
Yeah. It's a shame that about the age of fucking Aquarius. Apparently it turned into the age of, like, Jaws quite quick, you know.
Lemmy was the front man. I mean, Hawkwind without him wasn't a Hawkwind.
I mean, he hated us for it all, really, at the time. Well, you would do, wouldn't you? You know, you think, you never dreamed that anything like that was going to happen, I suppose, because, I mean, we were doing really well. We had you know, we'd sold quite a lot of records around the world and all that. We were playing in nice venues, you know, we were sort of living it up a lot. We were living the high life, like, you know, and for that to suddenly, terrible, you know.
And then in the book I read that Lemmy described me as sanctimonious, self-righteous arsehole at some point, and I thought, oh, well, that's all right. That's what he thinks of me.
Have you seen everybody over the years? I mean, have you...
Yeah, except for Simon King, I never saw him again. And he left the band quite soon after anyway, or he got fired, I don't know what happened. But I mean, Nick was instrumental in firing me with Simon, and then a year later Nick got fired, so he had poetic justice.
I mean, the band had meetings in hotels, because, I mean, we were travelling around a lot, and they sort of, you get cliques within a band. I mean, there was, in our band, there was 6 people, you know, we had 2 drummers. So, you know, some people go to bed early, others will stay up smoking dope. You know, all these things used to go on. And so consequently, they'll be talking about what so-and-so did and what they think things got to be changed here and there. And after Lemmy went, which was in Canada, wasn't it? It was probably maybe about 6 months afterwards, you know, that then it was my turn, really, you know.
I went home and screwed 3 other old ladies. You know, well, you know, vengeance is sweet, saith the Lord, you know. And I must admit, I was banging one of them already before we left. Well, I saw her first. But it was a great time. I wouldn't have traded it for any other band, ever, you know. In fact, I would have probably been in that band right now if they hadn't fired me, you know.
Silver Machine, as sung by Lemmy, the great Lemmy.